Hi there once again and welcome to another Expresso mechanic tutorial, and this is the first in a two-part series in which we're going to be building a tilting train. Now I thought initially that this was going to involve Python. It isn't going to at all. All we're going to do to achieve this is use Expresso and a combination of Align to Spline and target tags. That's all we need in order to make this happen. In the first tutorial, we're going to be building the bogies. We'll look at how we make the tracks as well. I'm not going to build the full tracks. I'm just going to show you the technique for doing it. And then we're also going to create the Expresso expression that's going to make the bogies move around the tracks in the correct way. That's what we're about with this first tutorial. So without further ado, let's see if we can make this happen. As I said earlier, the first thing I'm going to show you is the technique that I used for creating the tracks. I won't create the full tracks because they're just too big and it's a bit time consuming, so I'm not going to go there. But we'll have a look at the way we do the actual tracks with the technique that I used. So if we cut to, or rather change to our top view, so function 2, we can now look down where we are. Now the grid spacing at the moment is 50. I actually used quite a large scale for this because of course it's a train, so you want a relatively large scale, although it isn't full scale. But the way I did this, I grabbed a hold of an arc. Now the first arc here, I'm going to just zoom out a bit, go into the object here, and I'm going to make this 2000 because that's the scale that I was working at, quite a large scale, as I say. Grid spacing of 500 centimeters, that's important. So that's about the level you want to be working at to create these tracks. I'm going to create another one. I'm going to turn on snapping actually. So I'm going to turn my snapping on, go into here and select grid plane snapping, and that will snap us to grid points, grid lines. That's fine. Get a hold of my arc and drag out another one. Hold down command and drag to create another one. Place this one here for what it is, and then we'll work with this and work with the end and start angles. Now our end angle wants to be at 0, and let's have a look. So actually our end angle, we'll make our end angle 360 and our start angle 270 for this one. Let's just zoom out a little bit further, and then I'll drag another one of these out and do the same again, play around with the start and end angles. So let's have a look, see where we are. We want to go to 180 from 270. That will be fine, I think. Make that 180. Nope, that's not good enough. 180. That's where I want to be. And then last one, we'll command drag this one out, place it in line with our other one up there. Just grab that so that it does it correctly. I've got an extra arc which I don't need, take that one away. Okay, and now we'll set this one up with the correct dimensions. Let's see where we are. We want that one to be, it wants to be 90 here, 90, and that wants to be 180. 180, and then I can drag that down into the correct position, which is there. Right, so I've got 4 arcs on the screen currently, and we need to put some more on there because what we need to do next is to copy this arc here, and we also need to start grouping these. So what I did, I grouped them and I called these ones center, and these will be inner. So what I'm going to do here is reduce the radius to 1990 because I want them to be 10 mil in. I'm going to place this arc in another group and call these inners, and then we can work on these. Now let's see where we are. So arc number 1 was the first one that we copied, and that gave us arc 3. I'm going to place this one at the top, this one second, third, and I'll also rename this dot 3 so that they're all in the correct order. And this can be 1, or rather it can be just arc. So now we can copy again. If I copy this one down into here and just leave it in there. And then I can make that 1990, and that gives me my second arc. This one, again, 1990. And finally, copy this one. Take that away. Just do that copy again, copy that one. And that one can be 1990. That's better. Right, so our inner ones are done, and now we need to copy again this one down here. Oh, I just don't want that, I just want that. Copy that down there. And this one needs to be grouped and called outers, or outer, that's fine. So again, this can be changed again to 2010. Select this one, copy it down, 2010. And finally our last one, not inside there, let's put that up there and then swap them over, 2010. So we've got our rails. If we zoom in closer, we can see that they are set up. Now the center rail here, or center spline I should say, is going to be the one that the bogies are going to travel along. And the outer and inner splines will be used to create the actual railway lines by using a sweep NURBS. We'll also use this center one for putting the actual sleepers on the tracks as well. So that's another one that's going to be used for that, another use for it. Okay, now from here, what we need to do is select our first set of arcs and then simply come down to here, and we want to say connect objects and delete, and that gives us one spline called center, and that's exactly what we want. And then from here we can go to our spline pen and we can go into points mode, go to our spline pen, and we can join this together so that we join all of those arcs together into a single spline. And it's a case of rinse and repeat for the other splines. So we just escape to come out of the spline pen tool, select this, click on here, select this, click on here. Now we've got these two set up, come back into our spline pen, and we can set these up the same way. That one's done. Click on the outer, same deal again. And they're done. Now we'll escape out of the spline pen and we'll go to our select tool. Now let's have a quick look and see what we've got. We're in points mode, and if we just select all of our splines, we can see that they're all the same. So they all start at the same point and they finish at the same point, which is essential, and the point orders are all the same, because you can see that if we just zoom in a little bit, they start white and then they become blue. Now there is a problem that I'm seeing though. I said they were all the same, but are they all the same? Well, they're not, are they? Because we can see that the center one is already blue. Now that's a problem. You've got to make sure that these are all the same. You must make sure they're all the same. Another thing we've got to do as well is work with our intermediate points. They're adaptive at the moment. We want them to be uniform. That's essential. Okay, so make sure you set this up. I gave mine 100 points. It doesn't matter, you don't have to, but make sure that they're uniform and that they're all working in the same way. So what we've got to do with our center here, we've got to select this point and make that the first point for a start. So if we come down into our point order and set first point, now let's see what we've got. And now we've got it correct, because you can see they're all white and they all end up at dark blue, and that's fine. That's what we want them to do. So that's all working fine. Okay, let's have a look, just make sure that everything is okay. Let's go round them. Yeah, all okay, all okay, all okay. But here there seems to be another problem, and I think it's because we need to say in our center we need to click close spline, and now we should be okay if we select all of them, and we are. You can see that we are. Okay, so those are essential things that you need to do when you're building your tracks. All right, so that's the first little bit of this that I wanted to show you, how to build the tracks, how to set this up. As I say, you can set your tracks up however you want to, but use this technique because it's far more accurate than using the Spline pen tool. I did try using that tool, but it caused more problems than it solved. So start with putting curves in and then build straights in between them by using the actual Spline pen to fill the gaps once you've connected and deleted. Okay, that's the technique that's the best one that I've found anyway to actually make this happen. Another thing that's a good idea is to probably select all and come into Spline here and say tangents soft interpolation, just to make sure that everything is soft, because your endpoints might be half hard interpolated. They might only have one tangent, but now you can see that they've all got two tangents. Every point has two tangents, so they're soft interpolated all the way through. Okay, so that's the final step. Now for the moment I'm going to leave it there, but we do need to actually copy a couple of these splines, because the initial spline, as I say, the inner spline here, this is going to be the one that the bogies actually move around. But this inner spline will need to be copied and raised, and it will also be the spline, or the copy will be the spline that the carriages and locos are moving around. So there is the bogies and then the actual carriages and loco parts are separate entities, and that's so that the carriages can be tilted. We can't make it all as one entity running round one spline. And then we also need the inner rail, or rather so the center one is what we're going to be running around, and the inner rail is going to be the one that we're going to be using as the spline that makes the actual carriages and locos tilt. So we need to copy that, and we'll work with that at a later time. And again, this is why you must make sure that they're all set up the same way, because if they're not, it ain't going to work. Okay, so that's cleared that one up, and that's hopefully all clear, and you know where you're going from here. So the next step is to actually start building the bogies, and for that I'm going to go to another scene and we're going to look at what we're doing there. So I'm going to my scene here. Now I've got some bogies in there, but I'm going to take that out, and we're going to start from scratch. But if I go into my view 2 and hit H, you can see what I've done there with the tracks. My tracks are quite involved and quite large, and they're not perfect, but you know, you can do tweaks and various other things to make them so. But anyway, that's all good. So that's the next step then. We're going to be looking at building the bogies. Okay, so we've got a new scene file, and I've just created brought in the rails and everything that makes those up. I've got a cloner in the scene. If we go to our top view, just move over a little bit and zoom in, we can see what we've got. So yeah, I mean, if we just go into Garage Shading Lines, it helps us see what we've got. Now the cloner's just got this cube in it, which is for the sleepers. There's 1,000 of those. That's the count value here, and of course they're cloned along a spline, and I've cloned them along the center spline there. So the center spline is used within the rails here. It also is used here, which is actually a copy of it. If we just go back into view 1, or rather our 3D view I should say, and zoom in, we can see that we've got a copy floating above the rails, which is actually a copy of the center spline. So the path here is a copy of the center spline, and this path spline is the one that we're going to be using to move the bogies around the tracks. That's what we're going to be using that for. Okay, that's just to illustrate that for you. So moving on from here then, if we just come back out again, we'll start to build the bogies for our trains to fly around these tracks on, or our train to fly around these tracks on. So I'm going to start somewhere over here, I think, and we'll start by bringing in a cone. Just bring it over here, somewhere to here. That'll do nicely. Go into our object, and now we can start to manipulate the cone. Now what we've got to do, our bottom radius, we want that to be 5. It doesn't want to be very big. And our top radius, something like 4.5. And our height may be 2. We'll orient it along the Z-axis. And we're ready to actually start doing some work with this. So we can see that we've got a wheel there. Let's just bring that somewhere in here. Place it so that it's just about on our tracks. Okay, so that's looking quite nice. And we can start actually fashioning this into a train wheel. In fact, 2 train wheels. Just move that up a little bit so that it's somewhere like that. Doesn't have to be absolutely spot on, but somewhere like that will be okay, I would think. Okay, looking good. Now, we need to take a look at our height and our rotation segments. We don't need more than 1 height segment. In fact, let's go into garage shading lines so that we can see what we've got. Now, we can probably get away with 8. Yeah, 8 segments would be fine for that, because we will drop this into a subdivision surface. So this is looking good. I think we've got pretty much what we need here. I would say that that's actually good for the actual initial dimensions of our cone. And what we can do then is to actually create a copy of this and just move it over here and turn it through 180 degrees and just move it into place somewhere here. See where we are here. So in our position Z, we've got minus 212.593. And what have we got on the other one? Yeah, we're 20 apart. So we can say, if we say 1992, or rather minus 1992, that's pretty good. And for this one, we can say minus 2012. And that, I would say, is pretty much smack on it. That's good. That's good. Let's just go into the top view object. Let's just have a quick look at what we've got, just to make sure that we're getting this as accurate as we can. Yeah, it can move. They can move a little bit, can't they? So let's just select both of them, and we'll just move them in a touch so that they're just about level with the inside of the tracks, somewhere about there. Let's see what we've got now. Yeah, that'll be fine. That'll be fine. Okay, great. So what we'll do, let's have a look. In our cones, we've got to do some more work before we make them editable. We just want to go into our caps and give these 2 cap segments. That should be good. And we don't really need to do anything more with them at the moment. We can just make them editable now and start to work with them. So what we'll do is go into polygon mode, UL for our selection there. If we do, so what do we want to do? Yeah, I mean, what I'm going to do here, and I'm going to do the same on the back, I'm just going to say I for inset, and we'll go, let's have a look, see if we go 1. The 1's a bit too much. Let's go 0.5. Yeah, 0.5 is good. And then I'm also going to extrude, so D for extrude, and I'm going to go -1. And we should have gone in by 1 centimetre there on both of them, which we have. We can then say I again and go, yeah, another half I think is fine, and then D, and this time will come out by 1, and that gives us the centres of our wheels, so that all looks good. UL again, select the outers here and here, and then what we'll do here is I for inset, see if we get the result that we want. We don't want preserve groups, so we'll take that off, and now we've got quite a nice result there. So we've got that going on. I'm liking that. And then again, D for extrude and -1. And now we're getting something that resembles a train wheel. That's looking quite nice. And then to finish it off, what we'll do, UL again, and select both of these. And then I'm going to get my scale tool, and I don't want to scale in the Z, so I'm going to switch the Z off, and we'll just bring these down to somewhere around there. And I think that'll be fine for that. And we're going to create an axle between the two of them, because what we're going to do is connect and delete. So we're going to hit this button down here. We've got one object now. And now I can say MB for bridge, and we can start looking at joining the two of these together so that they become one object with an axle between them. And there we go, we've done it. Okay, so that's our first set of train wheels created. We'll throw that by holding down our option key and clicking on subdivision surface. We'll throw that into one of those. Actually, before I do that, I've actually missed a stage. What I'm going to do is just go back to there. What I need to do first, I actually need, I need to say UL, select these by holding shift down so that I don't lose any of my selection there. And then I need to say D for extrude, and I'm going to go, see what if we go 1. Too much, I think. So if we go 0.5, yeah, 0.5 I think is good. That just gives us that. And then we can say UL again, go around this edge here, select this edge here, and then say D for extrude. And we'll go just try 0.5 because it might be okay. Let's have a look. Yeah, I think that is okay. That's given us our train wheels. That's That's nice. And then we can do the same as we did before and bridge this gap. So if we say UL, select the inner there, the inner rim there, and get a little bit closer, MB, and join those together, and we've got the axle in. And that's fine. Now we've got it. Now we've got what we want. And we can then throw that into a subdivision surface. So hold down option, throw it in there, and we've got something that's looking really nice. We can now go to edge mode, select that, select our cone. It's in isosceline editing at the moment, which I don't like, and I don't want to use that. UL again, and I'm going to click there because I know that I've selected the inner edge, and I can just bring that in. Go into here, click there, done the same thing again, and then just select this loop here and this loop here, and I'm going to just tighten those into there, and that looks good. So that's giving us a nice rim around there. And then finally, the cut. There's one more thing I'm going to do actually. I'm going to say KL for loop cut, and I'm just going to put a cut here. And I'm going to do the same on the other wheel here. I'll just bring that back slightly. You don't have to be too pedantic with this, but as long as it's good enough, it's fine. And that's really quite nice now. We've got something that looks really good. Yeah, I'm liking that. Okay, great. So we can get hold of our subdivision surface, and we've got our cone there. Now let's have a look, see what we've got here, because we've got that there and we've got that there. Okay, good. We've got our axes in the correct point. Now we just need to lower these wheels down so that they're touching the tracks. They want to be somewhere about there. Again, you don't have to be too pedantic with this. As long as it's near enough, it's good enough. That's okay for our purposes. I mean, obviously, if you're going to design something that's physically accurate, you want to be a bit more pedantic about it. But for what we're doing here, I think that looks really nice. Okay, great. So we'll call this wheels 1. And the next thing to do is make a copy of it. So command drag and call this wheels 2. And then we'll space these apart. So let's see where they are. So on the X, they've got to move. So if we say, let's have a look, plus 20. Yeah, I mean, that's good. They're positioned about correctly. So 20 centimeters apart is fine for that. That looks really nice. We could go -20, but we'll just leave it as plus. That's fine for now. Well, actually, I'll tell you what, we will. Yeah, let's just move that. I'll just do that again. I'm just going to say -20 there. -20. So that I'll get it in front. I think that's correct. Let's have a look. Let's just make sure I'm singing from the correct hymn sheet here. Yeah, that's where I want that to be. Okay, that's great. That's great. So I've got my wheels in and they're ready to go. The next thing I need to do is just bring in a cube. I'm going to drop this cube into wheels 1 there. Just place it beneath the cone. It doesn't really matter, but I'll place it beneath it anyway. Bring this to where it needs to be. And then we can start working with its size. So we want, say, maybe 2 in the height. In the Z, maybe 16. And probably about 25 here. Now we can move that. Along the X, we can move it -12.5. And it should be, is it in the, no, not quite in the correct place, is it? Make it try -10. Yeah, -10 is good. Okay, that's fine. And then we can just raise this up so that it's just on top of the wheels. Again, with this, I'm not being too pedantic. I'm really not. It doesn't have to be too pedantic. As long as it's near enough is good enough for what this is, that's fine. So that's a little platform that we've got there. And then the last thing to do is bring in a cylinder. Group, let's just take that out of there. Group that into the cube and zero it out. And that's in the correct place. And then we can work with this. So radius of about 5. Could be smaller actually, could go 4. Yeah, 4 is good enough. And then a height of, say, let's have a look. We'll just do 2 for the minute, and I only want 1 height segment. And that's fine for that. And then let's just move this up so that it sits there. Let's see where it is in our front view. Let's just make sure that we've got it in the correct place. It needs to be just above the wheels. So what I'm going to do is just make its height a little bit higher. If I make it 3. Or maybe 2.5. And then drop that so that it just sits on the top of there. And it's just above now, and that's fine. That's where it needs to be. Okay, so that's our first bogie pretty much set up, and we can just drop the cylinder out of the cube. Our wheels are ready, and we can group all of this together. So we can select all of them and group them. Right, so they're grouped, and that's good. That's all fine. Now, the only other thing I need to do is just check the position of the null object and make sure that I've got it in the correct place. The first thing I'm going to do is actually remove everything from here for a second. Now, this null I want to be facing in this direction, so I'm going to turn it through 90 degrees, and now it's pointing along the Z, which is what I want it to do, because I want to follow the spline tangentially along the Z axis. Let's have a quick look in our front view. Now the spline's height needs to actually match or the null object, so the null is actually too high at the moment. So let's have a look at the path spline and go into its coordinates. So the path spline is 8.5 in the Y. Let's have a look at where the null is. Yeah, so if I set that to 8.5, that's where it needs to be. So it's on the actual path spline there, which is where I want it to be. Let's just have a quick look where it is in our top view. It looks as if it's pretty darn good there too. It's going to align okay, I think. I don't think there's going to be any problem there. So let's just place that back, and then we can put the objects back in here, and we're going to call this B1 for bogey 1, and we're also going to group it as well. So I'm going to group it into a null and call this Bogies. So we're ready. So we've got our first one there. Now the next thing I'm going to do is start copying. I'm going to copy this a dozen times. So call that B2. And then copy again. I'll copy these two. Copy these two. And that gives me 6. And I just want to copy all of those. Okay, great. And then I can just go through them and rename them. B6, B7, B8, B9, B10, B11 and B12. Okay, so all my bogies are there and they're ready to go. Of course, at the moment, they're all occupying exactly the same space. And we need to spread them out in the correct way. Now, in order to do that, we need to reach for our good old friend, Expresso. So we'll get a null, we'll rename it Expresso, give it a programming Expresso tag, and then we're ready to start work. One thing we do need to do before we actually reach for the Expresso is to select all of these and give them Align to Spline tags. Now, the path they need to be on, of course, will be this spline path, so we can place that in there. And they've all moved. It's because our spline path begins at a different point. So let's just go into view or top view, hit function 2 to go into our top view, hit H to select everything, and we can see where these are. Now they're over there. So if we come back into our standard 3D view and I want to just hit O for object. Now they're there, they're on there. They're actually at the start of the spline. They're not aligned tangentially yet, so we'll make that happen. So we'll say tangential, and now they're correctly set up on the actual spline itself. Let's just zoom out so that we get them in the correct place. Okay, that's fine. That's all looking good. The next thing to do then is to actually start reaching for Expresso, because we've got to get this correct. So let's just make sure that we've got everything in there. Tangential, that's got to be tangential, that's correct. And we're on path. Okay, everything is good. So we're aligned on the correct axis. Great, so that's ready to go. So if we open the Expresso tag, we're ready to start work. The first thing we need to bring in is a hierarchy. So we'll come into our iterator menu here, and we want a hierarchy. So we'll grab one of those. At the moment, the hierarchy is referencing the Expresso because it always references initially the object that the Expresso tag is on. We don't want that. We want it to reference the bogies. So we've got that sorted out. So it's referencing what we've got in here now. So it's going to sequence through these, which is exactly what we needed to do. Our next node will be an object index. So we'll bring one of those in. And we can plumb the output of the hierarchy into the instance input of the object index. Moving on from here, we need some math nodes. Now, we'll bring in just one for the moment, and then we can copy the others as we need them. The first thing we need to do is plumb this index value in here, and we're going to divide that by 180. Now, this number is not written in stone, and depending on the length of your tracks, it may need to be changed. But I've found that 180 works really well for what I'm planning to do here. So we divide that number by 180. The next thing to do is command drag to copy, and we're going to change the function of this math node to a modulo. I'm going to plumb in the index again into the top input, into input number 1, and it's going to be modulo 2. So for every 2 bogies, we want something to happen. The next thing to do is to command drag and copy this again and change the function this time to subtract. Plumb this into here. Now I'll just bring those back actually over there. Now this subtract, this is an interesting number. It needs to be a number less than 1. Now 9 or 0.997 is the number that I've found to be a sweet spot for what I'm doing here. Okay, you'll see what this is going to do a little bit later when I've got the expression pretty much complete to the stage that it needs to be completed to. But for now, we'll just put 0.997 in there and this will do our job for us. The next thing to do is get a condition node. Let's come down to logic condition, bring one of those in. And this is going to be switched via the modulo. That's going to be the switch for it. Now, for this to work, we plumb the divide into input number 1. And we plumb the output of the subtract into input 2. So what this allows us to do is work with our bogies in pairs. With the first one, we simply divide its index value by 180 and then we can place it along the spline at the given point. The second one, we're subtracting a further 0.997 from it. So this sets it back from where it would normally be. And then we can repeat the process once again. And you can see that this is going to create the kind of pattern with our bogies that you would expect to see within a train. So that's got this so far. The next thing to do is to bring in another iterator, and this time we want a tag iterator. We can place that up there and we want to plumb this instance into there. So we're taking, let's just hit H so that we can see everything and then view this at 100%. Okay, great. So we're going to take the tag iterator here and we're going to set its tag type to align to spline because these are going to be the tags that we're interested in. We could have just left it at all, but for the sake of being correct, set it up to align to spline so you're definitely going to get the tag that you want. We then need to think about adding some user data to this Expresso null here. So we'll go into our user data and we'll say add user data. I'm going to call this position. And it will be a float, and it will be a float. Well, we can use a float slider. It doesn't really matter actually, but we'll put a float slider in there. A real value, and it will be a value, well, the actual step, we're going to say 0.001. So we want it to be in thousandths, a very small value. It will start at 0 and it will finish at 1, and we'll clamp those values so that we don't go any higher. Okay, so that's all we need to do in there, and we can just hit OK. So we've got our user data set up and it's ready to go. Now we can then bring in the Expresso into here and give it the position from the user data at the output. The next thing to do is create another math node, and this time it needs to be an add. So we're using a bit of everything in this expression. And we're going to take the result that's coming out of the condition and plumb it into input number 2, and we're going to plumb Expresso's position output into input number 1. And then the final step is to bring in an align to spline tag, give it an object port, and give it a position port. The object will come from the tag, so that will get the tag here and place it into this align to spline, which is a temporary placeholder. And then this data coming out of here we're going to use as the position data, and we can plug that in there. Now let's see what's happened, if anything. We'll go into our bogies. Let's just see where we are, see what we're getting. And we can see, haha, look at that. We've got train bogies. So we can see we're going to have a carriage here, the next carriage here, or rather probably a rear loco there, a carriage, another carriage, and our front loco. It's all set up, and they're all set up in the correct way. And that's because of what we've done with these nodes in here. It's these, the magic nodes are the subtract and the divide. They're the really magic nodes because, as I said, these numbers are not set in stone. If we start playing around with these, you can see it shortens the gap between the actual carriages. You can make a smaller train if you wish to, but I found the sweet spot, as I said, was 180. It was about right for what I wanted to do. And this subtract, again, this will change. If you can't change it by huge amounts, but if you make it say 0.996, you'll see that again it tightens the gap between them. Now I don't want that. I want it to be 0.997 because I think that's about right. That gives us a gap between our carriages, which you would normally get. The bogies will come so far, and then you'll get a bit more carriage at either end of the bogie, and you'll always get an overhang on the locomotives at the front as well. So that is the sort of secret formula for setting this up, and it's absolutely beautiful. Now the thing is, if we close this down and we go into our Expresso, we can then start moving this, and you can see that it all works. It works perfectly. The spacing stays the same and it moves. It's going to move around the tracks exactly as you'd expect a train to do so. So those bogies are going to move perfectly well. Now if you want to, you can add more bogies. You can actually do this, and it will space them out accordingly, and it will keep them to the same patterns all the way along. So you can have we've got a dozen here because I'm going to have 2 locos and 4 carriages. So I need 2 bogies per loco and per carriage. So that gives us 12. But if you wanted a longer train, you can just add to it, and as long as you do it and you just add to it, it will space them out accordingly and it will work. So that's a really, really great formula for setting this up. It works beautifully. Let's just see that. It works absolutely beautifully, that does. And it's simple. There's not an awful lot going on. It's just a number of different math nodes that are making this happen. And then the Expresso is being used for the position. That's all it is. It's nothing clever. So that sets up the bogies. That's set them on the actual tracks, and it will move them around the tracks correctly. Let's just zoom in. If I go into bogie number 1 here and just zoom in. The only thing is, at the moment, of course, although they'll move nicely, if we move this, we can make them move. The wheels are not doing anything. What we'll do, I'm going to allow myself 1,000 frames, and I'm going to record the position value at 0 and then go to the end and then make this 1 and then record the position value there. So now if we run this, you can see that it starts off slowly and it gradually builds up because of course it's using an ease in out or ease out in curve to actually work. We've not got it set up in linear mode in the dope sheet, but that's, or I should say the F curve sheet, but that's fine. That's as I want it to be. So the next thing I want to do is actually make the wheels turn and make them revolve in the correct way, and that will be our next port of call, and that will be a bit more Expresso. Right, so let's open the Expresso once again, and we'll make the window a little bit bigger and just move these down a little bit. So how exactly are we going to make this happen? Well, let's bring in our path and give that an object port. And what I'm going to do is create a circle, and I'm going to group that circle. Where are we? Let's group it into cone number 1, and then we can zero it out. Just zero it out, and then we'll start playing around with the, let's just take that out of there, zero that up. Let's go into the object and we'll make it much, much smaller. We want to make it about 5 as an initial value there. It wants to go smaller than 5. It's probably going to be 4, I think, or maybe 4 point. I don't know, we'll try 4. Let's try 4. Probably a little bit too small, I think, 4. Let's get a bit closer to it. Let's see where it is. Okay, 4 is too small. Let's split the difference. 4.5. Yeah, that's fine. Right, so we want the circumferential length of this circle, and we want to basically divide that into the length of the spline. So we'll bring in our circle and we'll give that an object port, and then we'll create a couple of spline nodes. Command drag just to copy that. Oops, don't want to do that. And we need to give them length output ports. And then we'll plumb our path into the object port and our circle into the object port of our second spline node. Get a couple of results. Just plumb that in there for the moment. Make it bigger so we can see it. So it's quite a long spline. It's 24,000 in length. Let's just view this at 100%. That's better. Copy that, command drag, and plumb our length into there. So we've got 28.285, and we're going to divide those two into each other. So what we can do is get a math node to do that. In fact, what I'll do, I'll copy this one, just bring that up there, and I'm going to say plumb that length into there, plumb that length into there. Just take this result and plumb that into there. Okay, so 875.563. Now, if we multiply this number by 360 to get the degrees, that will give us what more or less what we want. So let's just get a math multiply, copy that one and plumb this into here and multiply the result. Again, we can plumb the output of that into there. So that gives us quite a large number. So 157,601.307. But we need to divide that by 2. So let's divide that by 2. And see what the result is there. So 78,800.653. So that's the degrees. That's the number of times that these wheels need to turn in order to go around this track once. So what we can do then is get a range mapper. Let's grab a range mapper. And we're going to take the output of this position here. So from 0 to 1. And that's fine because the input range is 0 to 1. So that's set up perfectly well for us. And then what we can do next is set our output range to degree. And we can set it to 78,000 or 788. Yeah, 78,800, isn't it? 78,800.653. And then what I'll do is bring in, I'm going to just lose this circle now because I don't really need it anymore. I will bring in the first set of wheels, just bring in those wheels. And their rotation, let's just check what I need to do here, if I just select them. Right, they're going to rotate around their rotation B. So we can say rotation B. And don't worry about these here, that's only because this object no longer exists and we can just rid ourselves of all of that now. We don't need any of that anymore. Okay, so we've got that set up. The next thing to do really is to check it out and see if it actually works. So let's see if it does. Well, it is working, but it's working in the wrong direction. So what we need to do is go into our range mapper and put a minus sign in front of this. Right, let's see what we get now. So let's just go back to the beginning and run it. It's a little bit, actually there's a bit of slippage in there, so that's not quite calculated correctly. So we'll have to have a quick look and see what's going on there. It needs to be a bit faster, doesn't it? So let's just see what's going on. We know a range mapper here. Maybe we didn't need to divide it by 2. Let's multiply it by 2 to bring it back to where it needed to be. So we've got -1. So let's just see what we get now. Yeah, and that's better. I think it works better like that. We didn't need to divide it by 2. Yeah, that's working, isn't it now? It's not slipping anymore. Yeah, that's looking good. That looks highly credible now. That's nice. That's really nice. Okay, great. So away we go, and they're working okay. Let's just have a quick look from this angle, just to make sure we think we're getting what we want. Yeah, that's fine. That's looking really nice. Okay, so our first set of wheels are turning okay, but of course we've got a dozen sets of wheels, and we want all of these to turn. So in order to make that happen, what we need to do then is to get a hold of these, and we'll just drag them in. We've got wheels 1 in there anyway, which we could use. In fact, we can actually use that. I don't need that second wheels 1, so I'll chuck that one away. And in wheels 2 here, I'll give this rotation B as well, and we'll just place that there. We'll unplumb that for the minute because we don't need it at the moment. And then just to finish this off, what I need to do is create 2 linked lists and populate them. So let's grab a hold of a linked list, place it here, and then command drag to copy it. And now we can think about populating these. So what I'm going to do is come up to my little magnifying glass here and do a search, and I'm going to say wheels 1. And that gives me all my wheels there. And now what I can do is grab a hold of them and populate my first linked list. Just click off the eyedropper there, and then say wheels 2. Grab a hold of my linked list and select all of these and populate the second linked list. And then I can simply plumb my range mapper into, let's have a look. I've got my range mapper in there. Yeah, I need to do some more work. Let's just make sure that we get this correct. Now the instance, let's have a look and see what we've got in the instance, or rather the index. Let's just get a result node. I just want to make sure of what I've got coming out of there. Let's have a look. So I've got 11. That's fine. So all I need to do is use the index from here, plumb that into there. I can plumb it into there. And then this range mapper it will be plumbed back into the rotations, but we need to give these object ports so that we can get our linked lists plumbed in correctly. And I'm going to move the objects up to the top and then plumb these 2 into there and there, and then plumb the range mapper into the rotations. Plumb this. We'll put this over here so that we can see better. Just get it a bit tidier. And that should do it. So let's just see what we get now when we run this. If I just do that, yep, you can see that all sets of wheels are moving on that one. And if we check out the others, you should find they all work the same way. It's just, yep, and all the wheels are turning. Okay, great. So that's really nice. All of the wheels are turning on all of the bogies. Away they go. Beautiful. Okay, that's great. So we've got our bogies working nicely. What we can do actually is, let's have a look, see where we are. We get to the front bogie, which I think should be that one. Yeah, that's the front bogie. What we can do, I'm going to click off my tool there and go into, let's have a look, objects, Come out of there. No, I don't want to go in there. Come out of that. What are we doing? Back into objects. That's it. Right, now we're back to where we need to be. So what we can do with bogey number 12, which is that one, what I'm going to do is just get a camera. I'm going to place it inside there and zero it out. Zero that completely out. I'm going to just change that to -180 so that it's facing towards the bogey. Going to the top view and just move it away slightly, and let's just go into our 3D view and then look through the camera. So we're looking at that bogey. Probably going to change its position slightly because I think we need to just get a little bit closer perhaps, and just to the side slightly. That's better. That's more what I want to see. Just go somewhere there. And then what we can do is just run the sequence and we'll be able to see where we are there. What I'll also do is come into my display and say isopalms, and we'll get a better result, I think. There we go. And we can see that the bogies are doing exactly what we thought that they would do. Looking good. Looking really quite nice. Okay, that's good. So that's all working. We can see that it's all working. I mean, that camera can be left there or it can be taken away. It doesn't really matter. We don't have to look through it if we don't want to. And we can hide it from view so it doesn't get in the way. But anyway, that's essentially, that completes the first tutorial. That's exactly what I wanted to show you. And you've seen that it all works really nicely. The wheels are spinning on the bogies. The bogies are all positioned as you'd expect them to be. And as I say, if you want to add more carriages, you can, and it will still work. So great, that's the first tutorial complete. Now in part 2, do tune in for that, because what we're going to be looking at there, we're going to build the actual locos, we're going to build the carriages, and of course we're going to set up the tilting mechanism that's going to make all of that work. So, you know, there's a fair bit to do to get that to go, but it should be a lot of fun, and the end result should look absolutely fantastic. So please tune in for part 2. But anyway, that just about wraps this one up. So, as I always say, I really hope you've enjoyed this tutorial and that you've got something out of it. And if you have, then please give the video a like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and of course ring the bell. And wherever you happen to be on social media, please share the video, because all of this good stuff really does help the channel keep on moving in the right direction. But anyway, that about wraps this one up, so I'll see you very soon on part 2.